Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales. I'm leaving, I said. Okay, then don't come back, replied my spouse. Usually, when I left, I'd say something mean like, go to hell. But this time, I didn't want my last words to be so harsh. We often said hurtful things to each other during our 14 years of marriage, but this time, I won't be returning. In a few days, she might understand what I meant. Lately, my wife Jenna has been saying really mean things to me. I don't know why. Her words hurt. To avoid fighting more, I started spending more time away from her, often in the car. I often came home late, after Jenna and her 13-year-old daughter had already eaten dinner. Sometimes I found leftovers. Other times, they were already thrown away before I arrived. My name is Kurt K. Kaminsky. Actually, my full name is David Kurt Kaminsky, but to avoid confusion with my father, who is also named David, they started calling me Kurt. I'm not a junior. My father's name is David John Kaminsky. I don't know why he didn't give me the name Junior. I would have been fine with the nickname Junior or DJ, but I was stuck with Kurt or nothing. Yes, I'm Polish, which means my family comes from Poland, but I'm also American. People often make jokes about being Polish, especially in the small town where I live, even though I'm only half Polish and have other backgrounds like German, French, Irish, and English. My last name, Kaminsky, makes people think I'm fully Polish. My wife, who will soon be my ex-wife, wasn't who I thought she was. I found out about this just 4 weeks ago. I've been distant lately because she's been saying and doing hurtful things. One Monday evening, I overheard a conversation in a nearby restaurant. It turned out that my wife and my best friend, George Carey, were betraying me. It was a shock. They talked about how they spent time together while I was busy in the parking lot, unaware of anything. I left, trying to get away so they wouldn't notice me. It was unbelievable. Jenna was with George. He even served as the chauffeur at our wedding. He's my mechanic, who will still be servicing my cars for some time. Although strictly speaking, he's not my mechanic, but an independent contractor whom I hire for repairs and maintenance of my vehicles. Yes, I'm a used car salesman. I also heard all these jokes and insults. However, my business is very good. People know they will get a great car at a good price. They also know that I am responsible for my cars. If problems arise, I take care of them. George has always been a good mechanic, and I keep him busy and pay him well. I wanted to hire him, but he said that he won't respect himself if he has a Pole as a boss. He said it jokingly, but I knew he was serious. I hired him as my independent mechanic contractor, although he was not very independent. In fact, I was his only source of income. This fact will be his death. I left the restaurant and drove around the neighborhood. Could this be true? I asked myself, or is he just toying? They could have hired a private detective, but if what he said was true, then they only met twice a month. This may turn out to be a waste of money, but what I could do was check her phone and email. This is exactly what I decided to do. I returned home and Jenna was as out of sorts as ever. This suited me. I didn't want to talk to her until I found out the truth. After she went to sleep on her side of the bed, I got up and checked her email. There was nothing suspicious there. Her phone was secured with a password, yet it didn't take me long to ascertain that our daughter's birth date was the code. I saw some messages that could have been misunderstood, but none were from George. His name was in her contacts, but he's my best friend, so that's normal. Maybe he was just joking around. But her recent actions made me think something might be wrong. Not necessarily with George, but with someone else. I went to bed, trying to sleep but couldn't. It was past 2:43 a.m. When it happened, that's when I last checked the time. The following day at the car dealership, George arrived and made jests about the Poles. This was typical of him, and I usually chuckled and let it pass. However, today I confronted him. George, what do you truly know about Poland? I wager if I presented a map of the world, you wouldn't be able to locate it. You jest that all Poles are foolish, yet I'm certain they could locate the US, and perhaps even our state, on a map. Why don't you educate yourself? George looked at me, unsure of what to say. He knew I was correct. He couldn't point out Poland if his life depended on it. George was never one for academic pursuits. He possessed street smarts and mechanical knowledge, but he had never been a scholar. I suppose that's why he gravitated towards me in high school. I helped him with his studies so he could at least graduate. Now, I find myself reconsidering my choice of companions, making me contemplate my choice of spouse. I retreated to my office, closing the door behind me, pondering how I could gather evidence of what might be transpiring. Confronting them both would only lead to denial. I needed proof. I contacted a private investigator in Santa Fe, expressing my concerns. However, he informed me that monitoring them would be too costly, given that it only occurred twice a month. Instead, he suggested putting a special thing on my wife's phone that could show me where it is without her knowing. He also talked about putting cameras in our house, but said if they weren't really good ones, she might find them. I chose the tracking thing for her phone that he said was good and promised to pay him for his help. Even though he said I didn't have to pay him, I felt like I should. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I secretly put the tracking thing on my wife's phone and connected it to mine. It would work quietly in the background without her knowing. The next day, I looked at the app sometimes to see where she was. She worked a bit at the university bookstore, usually for 15 to 20 hours a week, and then she'd often go to the salon with the money she earned. Later, she went to the store and came home. George was at home most of the day, but it seemed like he wasn't there when Jenna was. This provided some assurance that nothing untoward had occurred that day. Determined to mend relations with my wife and daughter, I suggested dining out together. Although my wife seemed somewhat apprehensive, my daughter, Carrie, displayed typical teenage reluctance. Despite her hesitance, I insisted, and she reluctantly accompanied us. Dinner was pleasant, though I made a point to mention George in conversation. Jenna's discomfort was evident as she quickly changed the subject. Further fueling my suspicions, I yearned to uncover the truth behind George's remarks. That evening, I refrained from checking her phone, finding no success in examining her calls or messages. Either she deleted them promptly or refrained from making any at all. As we settled into bed, I thanked Jenna for joining us for dinner. She responded with gratitude, hinting at intimacy with her gaze. Mixed emotions swirled within me. If she had been unfaithful, did I desire intimacy? Resolved to await concrete evidence, I decided to let her initiate any further intimacy, hesitant to reciprocate until I had confirmed my suspicions. I refrained from taking the initiative. Eventually, we engaged in intimacy, but it was rather mundane. There's no need to delve into specifics. Nonetheless, I found some enjoyment in it. For the remainder of the week, I monitored the location of her phone, finding nothing unusual. On Saturday night, after she fell asleep, I looked at her phone again, but still didn't find anything. I started to think maybe George was just making up stories to sound cool, like he used to do in school. I went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. It was 2 a.m., and I was just lying there, staring at the ceiling. I got up and went downstairs to get a drink, hoping it would help me sleep. I sat down with a glass of Jack Daniels and Coke in one hand and her phone in the other. I decided to check her phone again. I used our daughter's birthday as the password and got into the phone. Then it hit me suddenly, like a shock. Our daughter's birthday was the key. The pregnancy had been arduous. There were moments when we feared we might lose her. Something about her RH factor didn't align with my wife's. It felt as though my wife's body was at odds with the baby growing inside her. In the final 3 weeks of pregnancy, my wife was confined to bed rest to ensure she could carry the baby to term. And indeed she did. Exactly 9 months after our wedding, Carrie was born. We were overjoyed that she was healthy, but she proved to be a challenging child. Constant crying, difficulty sleeping, it made things difficult. In the second year of Carrie's life, my wife adamantly declared that we wouldn't be having another child. While it saddened me, the truth was, the arrival of our first child had drained much of the joy from our lives. Considering that she was born precisely 9 months after our wedding, she fell into the category often referred to as wedding night babies. Conceived on the wedding night or during the honeymoon, a realization dawned on me. If George's claims were true, there was a strong likelihood that Jenna was already pregnant before our wedding night. Jenna had been on birth control pills, and we hadn't waited until marriage to engage in intimacy. In fact, it had been a significant part of our relationship. When questioned about Jenna's pregnancy, the doctor suggested that the stress of the wedding may have rendered the pills ineffective. If they were ineffective that night, it stood to reason they were ineffective before as well. Now, I knew what needed to be done. There was a 50% chance that I wasn't the father. You know the saying, the early bird catches the worm. Well, when it came to George, it seemed like the saying, the early bird catches the worm, was more fitting. I got up from the couch and went to the bathroom to get some cotton swabs before going to Carrie's room. She was fast asleep, finally getting into a good sleeping routine at 4 years old. She was snoring softly with her mouth open. I easily took a cotton swab and gently swiped the inside of her cheek. She didn't wake up as I carefully put it in a plastic bag. Then I did the same thing for myself. If it turned out that Carrie was really my daughter, It would raise questions about whether Jenna had been faithful. If she wasn't my biological daughter, well, I'd deal with that later. Sunday was all about doing chores around the house, with each of us having our own tasks to do. I took my time, avoiding long talks with Jenna or Carrie to hide how I felt. Even though I really wanted to find out the truth, I couldn't shake off my doubts all day. Jenna noticed something was up and asked me about it. I quickly made up a story about plans for our business. She always talked about our business together, which made me feel better. But in truth, I set up a separate thing for the parking lot to protect my money, especially living in a place where people are pretty traditional. I made sure my business stuff didn't mess up my personal life, wanting to be ready for whatever might happen if Gino found out. I decided to pay off my credit cards and be careful with money. That's when I realized I had to do something. Early Monday, I took the samples to a university and talked to the head of the science department about testing them. They said they'd help and even offered to do the tests as part of their biology program. I gave them some of my business cards and promised a discount to anyone who worked on the samples. They seemed happy about that. On my way out, I mentioned maybe getting a new car and said I'd check out their selection. The guy said he'd help me find one I liked. I smiled, but I was worried. The test results could mean the end of my marriage. When I talked to Jenna about buying new cars for the lot, it was just to hide how worried I was. Now, I thought, this isn't a bad idea. I called Paul, my accountant, loan officer, and part-time salesperson into my office and told him about my idea. We will succeed, he said. Paul, there's something else I'd like to do. I would like to pay off the mortgage on my house. Can we agree on a lump sum payment so I can do this? Let me take a look at the financials and get back to you after lunch, he said. As he left my office, I thought about calling my lawyer and asking for a referral to a family lawyer. Then I thought, you may be in a hurry. Let's see what the results are first. After all, I have yet to find any evidence that my wife was having an affair. After lunch, Paul showed me the spreadsheet and we discussed next steps for both of my plans. The next 2 days were some of the longest. I was on the verge of death while waiting for the DNA test results. Late on Wednesday evening, the head of the department called me. He was coming to us with the results and to look at the car. When he arrived, I directed him straight to my office. He looked at me, and the look on his face told me what the results were. Then he spoke and confirmed it. The two samples we checked aren't connected. I nodded, but he could see I was really upset, even though I kind of expected it. He gave me a moment to take it in and handed me an envelope with the results. When I looked back at him, I tried to seem normal. So, about that car you mentioned, I said. Well, I just turned 50, and I thought it might be fun to get a sports car, like a Mazda Miata. I told him I didn't have one yet, but I was going to an auction tomorrow to see if I could find a good one. I said I'd call him later to let him know what I found. When he left, I told Anna that I would leave early, but if she needed me, I would only be a phone call away. I knew she wouldn't call. She rarely needed me. She could handle almost anything that needed to be done. I drove around the city, just watching. Strange, but for me, everything looked different. Then I called my lawyer. He was saddened by the news, but referred me to another lawyer who he knew would do the right thing. After calling, I made an appointment for late evening the next day. I had a snack at a restaurant and thought while I was eating, have I really wasted the last 15 years of my life? I couldn't even say that I had a child from this marriage. Of course, I still considered her, to some extent, my child, but biologically, she was not. What should I do next? I knew I couldn't act like I didn't know anything. Of course, I wasn't ignorant before, but now that I knew, there was no turning back. One thing I knew for sure, George would pay. I didn't care that he had been my best friend for years. With friends like him, I could use more enemies. Jenna would pay too. I wondered if Jenna knew Carrie wasn't really my daughter. Even if she didn't, she kept this big secret from me. The secret of her being with my best man, my own friend, on our wedding day. Now, I had no reason to doubt what I heard. She was having fun with him at least twice a month. I started feeling really angry, and I knew I needed to be alone before I lost control. I should have called Jenna and told her I wouldn't be home that night. I couldn't go home. I might end up doing something that would get me in trouble. When she picked up the phone, I said, "Hey, I'm going to spend the night in Albuquerque so I can be ready for the auction at 8. I didn't show any emotion. She just said, "Okay, have a safe trip." I don't usually go to Albuquerque for auctions, so this was weird. I wondered if she'd take advantage of me being gone all night. She'd have to come up with some excuse about Carrie for my parents, and that wouldn't be easy. but I planned to check her fake tracker on her phone now and then to see if she went anywhere else. As I drove to Albuquerque, I thought about buying at least 20 cars, including a Mazda Miata. I'd get them picked up and sent to my lot after the auction. Now, I had to figure out who to trust to check their engines and stuff. Once George finishes his regular checks and fixing the machines, I won't give him any more work. When he finds out I bought 24 cars, he'll probably think about how much money he can make off me. But I won't let him know until the last minute. I need to talk to some auction dealers in town to find someone trustworthy to check the cars before they're sent to our small town. I arrived in Albuquerque around 9 a.m. and stayed at a Best Western hotel. Even though I own the company, I can't use the company's money for a fancy hotel. The room was nice and the bed was comfy. That's all I needed. I am a simple person with simple needs. When I entered the room, I immediately checked Jenna's phone tracker. I discovered that she was still at home, or at least her phone was at home. That night, sleep was difficult. I kept going over in my mind why she did what she did. How could she justify having a night with him on our wedding day, let alone twice a month for who knows how many years? I began to reconsider our marriage. He was never perfect, but I thought we loved each other exclusively. Now I know that this was a mistake on my part from the very beginning. In the first few years after the wedding, things were not easy. Of course, we weren't expecting a baby right away. We originally planned to wait 3 to 4 years and then start a family. 3 children is what we agreed on before the wedding. However, the fight with Carrie ruined these plans. When I found out that these plans were ruined by my best friend, all the struggle began to seem in vain. 14 years of wasted effort. There had been good times, of course, but even those were now overshadowed by this news. If Jenna hadn't had an intim with George, maybe she would have gotten pregnant with me. And maybe she wouldn't have had such a bad pregnancy and difficult child that made her not one anymore. George destroyed everything when he got with my wife on our wedding day. Now, he's with her at least twice a month, and I bet he thinks it's funny that he's caused so much trouble. I thought about it as I lay down, trying to sleep. I was mad all over again. I had to calm down or I wouldn't be able to sleep. So, I turned on the TV to some silly comedy show. Laughing helped me relax, and by 11 p.m., I was ready to sleep, excited for the busy day ahead. The auction went smoothly. I got some great cars at great prices and got to know some dealers in the Albuquerque area. I didn't see any Miatas at auction, so I started asking other dealers. 2 of them had one each, one red, the other black. I asked them if they would be willing to make a deal once I found out what color my client preferred. Of course, each of them said, "Just let me know what cars are on your lot, and we'll get it done." I should have come to this auction more often. Communication with other businessmen engaged in the same type of business inspired me to expand my business. Besides, it distracted me from my problems. In the afternoon, when I met with the lawyer, the news was not very good. I will lose half of all my property and will have to pay alimony and child support. Child support for a child that wasn't even mine. Then I decided that I would not get a divorce. Instead, I'll leave her with George's baby. I would pay off the mortgage on the house. She could have stayed in it, but my name was the only one on the mortgage, so she couldn't sell it if I moved out, but continued to pay taxes and utilities. She wouldn't be able to resign and take the house. However, I had to decide what to do with my business. It was registered as a corporation, but somehow I knew that if I didn't do something to protect it, I could lose it. I needed to talk to my business lawyer about this. When I walked through the door of my house, I was exhausted from a long day, so I said to Jenna, "I'm tired. I'm going to take a shower and go straight to bed," and went to the bedroom. "Do you want to have dinner?" she called. "No, I had a late lunch," I answered. At least she thought to ask. The shower was wonderful. It felt like my problems almost melted away. I had problems, but I was starting to figure things out. I fell asleep shortly after lying down. I'd been stressed out all week, but now that I was making a plan, my mind could relax. I woke up early, feeling refreshed, and went to the office before Jenna and Carrie were even awake. I had lots to do and even more plans. When my staff started showing up, they found me buried in paperwork spreadsheets, financial reports, and sales forecasts. I told Paul that I bought 23 cars and that we'd finalize the deal for the one at the dealer in Albuquerque within a week. I also told Anna not to give any more work to George, but to keep it quiet. She looked confused. "You're the boss," she said. "Thanks, Anna. You're so important to us." At 9 a.m., I called my business lawyer and asked for advice. "Your business is officially registered, but she might still try to make you sell it to split the value," he explained. Have you thought about selling it before? No. Should I asked. It could help keep the business safe, he suggested. This business means everything to me. I can't get rid of it, I told him. Okay, let me think a little and study the situation. I'll call you at the end of the week. This news was devastating. I have worked hard to build my business into what it is today. Here's the corrected passage. This is my child, unlike Carrie. I thought to myself, now I was filled with rage. Again, part of being a good business person is the ability to compartmentalize and multitask. I needed to put my personal problems aside and get back to business. First on my list was to call Doug, the department chair, who determined that what George said was true. Doug, Kirk Kaminsky, I have information about two Miatas that might interest you. One is red and the other is black. Are you still thinking about it? I asked. Yes, if the price is right, he said. What color are you interested in? I'll bring it here so you can look at it, and then we'll discuss the numbers. Even if we can't agree on a price, I'm sure I can sell it without too much trouble. And which one would you suggest? He asked. Each has its pros and cons. Fire red is a great statement color, but it fades faster. Black looks elegant, but in our climate, it gets hot quickly. Will this car be kept in a garage when you are not using it? Yes, I can do it. Then the red won't be exposed to the sun much, so fading won't be a problem. I'd go with this unless you think black is more your style. Red sounds great. How soon can I see her? Is Monday or Tuesday suitable for you? Of course. Call me when you receive it. Fine. I hung up and called the dealer who had the red one to arrange a trade. He became interested in the BMW on my property. It had been there for 3 months. He would have had a better chance of selling it in a big city by this time. George arrived. He had several cars that still needed to be repaired. He could work on his own schedule as an independent contractor, and as long as he finished the job when I needed it, I was happy. He overheard some salesmen talking about 23 cars that were coming to our warehouse soon. Hey, Kurt, when are these cars from the auction coming in? I want to make sure I'm ready to work on them for you, he asked. They should be here sometime at the end of next week or early the week after, I told him. It was hard for me to stay calm talking to him, this annoying trader. Okay, I'll talk to Anna and get on the schedule, he said before leaving. I just chuckled to myself as he walked away. That weekend, I tried to keep my distance from Jenna. I worked in the yard and ran a lot of errands. I didn't even check her phone tracker. For me, it no longer mattered. I felt only contempt for her. The fact that I was raising someone else's child was unforgivable. On Monday, I was at the car show again. I called the dealer in Albuquerque and told him I would drive the Beamer over and pick up the Miata. He replied, "Great, we'll have a late lunch when you arrive." It was a good day for a trip, so I told Anna that I would be gone all day. Hold the line, I told her. Okay, boss, she replied. She truly was irreplaceable. I need to give her a raise, I told myself. The trip was pleasant, as was the lunch. The other owner made me feel welcome, and I felt like I had a new friend. On the way back, driving the Miata, I really enjoyed myself. The top was down and the wind was ruffling my hair. I decided that I would call another dealer and get a black car. I wanted to have some fun, and I didn't really need more than a 2-seater car right now. I drove into our driveway in a red sports car. Jenna looked out the window and must have said something to Carrie because they both came out to see. "Why did you get this car?" "We need one with a back seat for Carrie," she said, sounding a bit bossy. "I just got it from Albuquerque for a client." "Thought you might want to take a ride," I replied. "No, I don't like small cars," Jenna said, sounding a bit annoyed. "Carrie," I said, motioning for my daughter to come over. "No, Dad, I already feel bad enough because of my last name," she said, not wanting to join. "I don't want to be seen driving around with a polished used car salesman." She said it like only a teenager could say it. I was stunned to say the least. Where did this disrespect come from? When I looked at Jenna, I realized that she was acting as if Carrie had done nothing wrong. Great, now both women in my house are disrespectful to me? I know teenagers aren't supposed to be best buds with their parents, but the hurtful way she said it made me look at my entire family life as a sham. Well, I'm going to go for another ride. "I'll be back as soon as I can," I said, putting the car in reverse and driving away. I drove along the roads of Silver City and its environs, fired up. My marriage was getting worse really fast. When I got home at 9:30, I went straight upstairs, took a shower, and got into bed. Jenna came into the room when she noticed I hadn't come down after my shower. The light from the hallway was shining right in my eyes, so I squinted and closed them. "What's wrong? Are you upset because we didn't pick a sports car? Aren't you going to come down and hang out with us? She asked. You're not just stubborn, you're acting like a kid, she added. Where did this attitude come from? I had to believe it came from George. She spent time with him, and his stripped-down attitude towards my roots rubbed off on her. Now she is passing it on to her daughter. It was her daughter, not mine. I guess I should get that into my head. I may have to support her, but she is not my daughter. It looks like you and your daughter would rather not have a pole around, so you might as well just off. I was furious, and her attitude wasn't helping her one bit. She'll regret ever treating me the way she does now. After that, the Kaminsky house was quiet and cold. The next day, I called Doug, and he came to check out the Maida. He was really happy with it. We talked about the price, and he was surprised at how good it was. It was $3,000 less than what you'd find in the Kelly Blue Book. Before he left, after filling out all the paperwork, he mentioned, "My best friend buys cars for the university, and we change about 16 cars every 2 years. It's not a lot, but could you talk to him?" "Sure thing. I'm always up for doing business, and you know I'll make a deal with them," I replied. "I'll have Jim give you a call by the end of the week." "Thank you," I said. "That's how I grew my business, by treating people right and letting them know I valued their referrals." On Wednesday, my lawyer called me. "Hey, Kurt, I think I have a solution to your potential problem. Could you come by this afternoon to discuss it with me?" "Of course. I can't wait to start." "The atmosphere in my house is becoming simply unbearable," I said. At the meeting that day, I heard the plan and liked it. It will take about 2 weeks to make it happen, but if it works, it will be worth it. During those 2 weeks, I slowly moved my stuff and tools from our house to an apartment nearby. At the same time, George was waiting anxiously for those 24 cars to arrive so he could do some work and charge me for it. When he asked about it, I kept putting him off. Last weekend, I did some yard work, and when Jenna and Carrie weren't around, I cleaned out my closet and drawers. Jenna usually did laundry during the week, so she was busy on weekends. This was good for me because she didn't notice that my closet was empty. So that brings me back to that Monday night when I told Jenna, "I'm leaving." She started being rude and disrespectful to me again, both as a pole and as a used car salesman. In the past, I would go to a motel for a night or two, depending on how angry I was. On Tuesday morning after this explosion, I arrived at the parking lot early, and as I asked them to go to the conference room, I closed the door behind them. I had weekly meetings, so this was nothing unusual. I started the meeting. "Good morning. As you all know, the cars that I bought a couple of weeks ago arrived yesterday afternoon. All of them have already been checked and prepared, so they are ready for sale. Right now, we no longer use George to do any work here. If he asks you, tell him we decided to go in a different direction, and leave it at that. You've all been amazing. You're like family, so it's hard for me to come to terms with what's next." I paused and wiped a tear from my eye. I sold the business. They all looked at me. There was surprise in their eyes. "However, nothing will change as far as your work is concerned. Well, besides Anna, you will perform some of my duties and, of course, will receive a corresponding increase." All of them, even in their surprised state, began to congratulate Anna. They all respected her and knew she deserved it. "Anna, after the meeting, please come and talk to me. We will discuss some things. I will still be involved in the company, but only on an advisory basis and may sell occasionally. I don't want to take away your sales." They were all glad that I would still be around, at least sometimes. The meeting ended, and as we walked out the door, George was standing there. "Hey, why wasn't I invited to the meeting?" he asked. He had been at most of the meetings before. "It was a meeting for staff only, and you're not an employee," I explained. He seemed surprised and then said, "I see the cars have finally arrived, so I'll start working on them." "No, they've already been checked and prepared for sale." "You don't need to do anything," I said firmly. He looked shocked and said, "But I'll still check all your cars, Kurt. What's going on?" "George, I sold the business, and the new owner wants to go in a different direction." I told him, not ready to explode at him. "I'll save that for another day." I left everything as is. It became clear to me that sometimes it is better to say fewer words. "I can't believe you sold the business," he exclaimed. "What should I do now?" Of course, it was all about him. He was basically told that he was out of work. "Well," I said, "you can pick up your check for what you did in the last 2 weeks. It wasn't that much." Anna used his services only a few times. He was relaxing before delivering 23 cars, thinking he would be busy when they arrived. How wrong he was. I didn't feel sorry for him at all. I just wish I could tell him that it was because he was a mean. When I met Anna, I asked her if she could keep our conversation a secret. Of course, Kurt. You know I'll never say anything you don't want, she assured me. Okay, here's the thing. I created companies that I registered in Nevada. One of the companies buys this parking lot. The other buys that company. I am the sole owner of shares in both companies. At some point, I will divorce Jenna and make sure she doesn't get the business. Why? She asked. I moved out of my house. Jenna doesn't know it yet, but I'm not going back. She had an affair with George. Actually, Carrie is not my daughter. I believe she is George's daughter. I don't even know if Jenna knows about this, let alone George. They'll soon find out. I'm not going to get a divorce, but I will continue to pay utilities and taxes for our house. This way, she won't be able to say that I abandon her and take everything I have. Just in case she files for divorce due to irreconcilable differences, I don't want her to be able to take over the business. That's why I agreed that the company would be bought twice. Let them try to figure out what's going on. The proceeds from the sale will be spent by the time she gets her divorce done. Also, I barely earn anything from consulting and a few sales commissions. Anna, you handle the day-to-day work just fine. I'll be here if you need help, but I trust you in your decisions. Her smile returned when I mentioned the new owner, but when I brought up Jenna and George, she looked ready to explode. I really respected and admired her. I have one more thing for you to do before I go, I said. I need you to order a new sign and letterhead. We're changing the business name. This will make it clear to George and Jenna that the business belongs to someone else now. The new name will be Helpless Car. I spelled the name so I knew she had it right. She looked at me in bewilderment. Someday I'll tell you why I chose this name. Suffice it to say, it tells the whole story, I said. She still looked puzzled, but she trusted me enough to follow my instructions. With that, I left, saying a few words to everyone as I left. I got into my car, an Audi, and drove down the road towards Albuquerque. About 2 hours passed when I received the call. Caller ID told me it was Jenna. I didn't expect her to call before the end of the evening. This has happened many times before. When I left, I'd go away for a day or two. She'd call, we'd talk, and I'd come back. Everything changed for a while, and then we became the same again. After a while, we would have a quarrel again, and the cycle would start all over again. I decided to answer the call, waiting to hear what nonsense she would spew this time. Hello, I said through the speakerphone in the car. CT, what's going on? She said, somewhat hesitantly. Nothing, just going to Albuquerque. Why are you going there? I need to pick up the car, I said calmly. So what I heard must not be true. George must have called her. In a way, call your friend to find out what's going on with her husband, she suggested. I don't know, I replied. What did you hear? George called me and said that you sold the business. Why would he call you? I asked, confused. She corrected herself. I mean H-E-K, your best friend. He wondered if I knew what was going on. Best friend. What a joke. I was a joke to him, the stupid Pole who is helpless and does not know what is happening behind his back with his own wife. Apparently, my family was embarrassed that I was a used car salesman, so yes, I sold the business. Now you won't have to bear that stigma anymore. Shouldn't we have talked about this first? She said. I'm sure she was worried about how we would live. Now, this is my company. I owned it before we got married, and I can sell it whenever I want. I just hope the new owner treats my former employees well. So, did you get a good price for it? Again, she was worried about how this would affect her standard of living. I didn't care. I just knew I needed to change jobs. I'll start looking after I take a few weeks off to relax. What about a mortgage? She asked. Oh, I used the money to pay off the house. You don't have to worry about that now. You just need to pay utilities and taxes. What about food? What about gas? What about insurance? She said, almost hysterical. Oh, I guess I'm a stupid Pole. I didn't even think about them. Do you think you could take on more hours at your job now? She was excited. What are you going to come back home? This is the moment of truth. I won't come back, I said casually. What? I said I was leaving that evening. You told me not to come back, so I won't. Don't worry, I'll figure out how to pay the bills so the power won't be shut off, I assured her. You can't leave. Kurt, you have to come back, she pleaded desperately. No, I really don't want to, I replied calmly. Please, don't do this, she cried. I did it already. What about your daughter? She asked, trying to tug at my heartstrings. You mean Carrie, the girl who was ashamed of her last name and the fact that her old man is or was a used car salesman, Kurt. She's just a 13-year-old girl. You can't take this to heart. Well, it doesn't matter anymore. I won't be back again, so none of you will be embarrassed of me. With these words, I hung up and turned off the phone. Let her think about it. I knew that now she was trying to call me back and would be angry that I wasn't answering the phone. After calming down from the phone call, I tried to enjoy the leisurely drive to Albuquerque. I could only assume that the next call she would make was to her lover to get more information and to let him know what I had said. When I got to my destination, I turned my phone back on and saw that I had 5 messages. I listened to them all, 3 from Jenna, 1 from George, and 1 from Anna. I immediately called Anna. Hi, Anna. Sorry, my phone was turned off. I have had unwanted calls. Yes, I know. Your wife and George called me to find out where you were. I told them you don't own this place anymore, so you don't come anymore. Hope everything is okay. Great, I said. If they give you too much trouble, tell them you're calling the police about phone harassment. I like it, she said. Kurt, you may feel like you don't have any family or friends anymore, but trust me, you do. We are your family and always will be. Thank you, Anna. You know what to say? I hope your husband knows how lucky he is. Trust me, he knows. He constantly tells me about this. Never lose this. Don't take each other for granted. I'm not gonna, she said. After hanging up, I wondered if I should call my cheating wife for this. No, let them rage. I got out of the Audi and went into the parking lot office. The owner was waiting for me there. I have that Audi that I told you about. Would you like to discuss if we can make an exchange? Let's see, he said. He was impressed with the condition of the car, both inside and out, as well as under the hood. He looked at me. I can sell it in a week. Are you sure you want to make an exchange? I feel like I'm getting a better deal. You can reciprocate sometime in the future. I'm not here to make money. I'm here to buy a sports car, I told them. Half an hour later, I was back on the road, enjoying the ride with the top down. I had to decide where to go next. Heading north to Santa Fe sounded good, so that's where I went. Over the next 2 weeks, I traveled through northern New Mexico, Arizona, southern Utah, and Colorado. I wanted to stay nearby in case Anna needed me to come back, so I called her several times. Once it seemed like she had everything under control, I decided to head west. They kept calling me, first annoyed, then apologetic, and finally, there was some bitterness in their messages. I listened, but I didn't care. When they called me and told me that the credit card had been canceled, I just laughed. When George called and said I was a terrible person for leaving Jenna and Carrie, I had to laugh even more. My lawyer actually sent me a message. Jenna called and threatened to file a stay-at-home order if I didn't contact her and come back. I called him back. Hello, this is Kurt. So, my wife called you with threats. I said, yes, but I wouldn't worry. If you're still paying on the house, she'll have a hard time proving it. I can do something better for you. I have a recording where I tell her I'm leaving and she tells me not to come back. It's amazing. Send me a copy of it, he said. If she gives me any trouble, I'll take it to her lawyer. Let her lawyer try to force things. Thank you. I'll call you in a week to find out what's going on. I've traveled all over the Southwest. The Maida wasn't the most comfortable car, but it was fun. A lot of people were looking at me. Some bored, anxious middle-aged women even tried to flirt, but I wasn't interested in that. After all, I was still married, no matter what. I drove to Reno, then Lake Tahoe along the coast, through Napa Valley and Highway 1, following the shoreline. Then I went to Yosemite, San Diego, through Death Valley to Vegas, and finally to Phoenix. I wasn't rushing. I stopped in parking lots, talked to the owners, and just chatted. Some of them were envious that a guy in his 30s could just travel like that. After about 3 months and 8,000 miles, I decided to go back to Silver City. When I got a helpless auto, my whole team greeted me. There were even some new faces. They were all happy to see me back. When I went into Anna's office, which used to be mine, she looked up and smiled even bigger when she saw me. She got up from her desk and hugged me tightly. We chatted for a bit, and then I asked, "Do you think I can invite everyone to Wrangler's for food and drinks? Can you close the store at 5? It was already 3, and I had a few things to do. Of course, I'll make sure of it. The whole team will be there, I said. I said goodbye and told them all that I'd see them in 2 hours. They were in a good mood. Then I visited my lawyer. He told me earlier when I was traveling that Jenna tried to go down the abandonment route to get all my property, but he was able to thwart her efforts. We talked about what to do next. At 5, I met the team at Wrangler Restaurant. We had a great dinner, and it was nice talking to everyone. After about an hour and a half, they began to go home. Finally, it was just Anna and me. I left. She looked at me and said, "You know, Kurt, you may think that you are helpless, vulnerable, and don't understand anything, but you're wrong. You simply trusted those you loved." I looked at her. "So you got it right." "Yes, it took me a while, but you said the new name would tell the whole story." This haunted me until I realized it. You may be polished, but all these jokes can never describe the real you. These jokes are an insult to you and your roots. Thank you, Anna. You are truly the main reason for my return. I had to see how you handle my responsibilities. Happy to say that you have not filled my shoes, but rather created a pair of your own. I had an excellent mentor. She thanked. We hugged. And she went home to her husband. He truly was a happy man. I returned to the apartment I had not been in for 3 months. It was musty here and needed good ventilation. I opened the windows and let the cool evening air fill the rooms. I grabbed a beer and sat on the terrace, watching people swim in the pool and a family playing nearby. I couldn't help but think about Jenna and me. We used to have so many dreams when we got married, but now it all seems gone. Glancing at the clock, I saw it was around 8:30. A thought hit me suddenly. It's time to face this head on. I stood up, hopped into my Maida, and drove back home. I guess technically it was still mine. I bought it before Jenna and I got married, and my name was the only one on the deed. I felt disappointed when I pulled into the driveway. The yard wasn't well kept, and it looked like no one had done any landscaping. The light was on, so I figured Jenna was home. I went to the door and knocked. A minute later, Carrie opened the door and looked surprised to see me. She asked, "Dad?" "Hi, Carrie. Is your mom home?" I asked. She seemed flustered and then called out, "Mom!" From the kitchen, I heard Jenna's tense, high-pitched voice ask, "What's going on?" Carrie looked at me and loudly said, "Dad." Jenna came around the corner, saw me, and screamed. "Where are you going?" I decided to respond calmly. Just then, George came out of the bedroom wearing only his underpants. "Oh," I said, "looks like the whole family is here, Mom, Dad, and child." "What the hell are you talking about?" Jenna spat back. "I suppose George moved to take my place after all. It is rightfully his." Jenna looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Carrie said he lost his apartment after you fired him, and Mom needed a man to help pay the bills and take care of other responsibilities here since you left." Then the rage in her voice was palpable. "Well, young lady, it appears you were misinformed. He hated it when I corrected her. George was never my employee and his insistence, so I could not fire him. As for bills, all utilities are paid, as is car insurance. What about food and gasoline in the car?" Jenna shouted, "You had a job. Did you lose it?" "I know that before it was just your mad money, but it was enough for groceries and gasoline while I was away." "So you think you'll come back? Back and just move back?" she asked. "No, I'll wait until you and your lover find somewhere to live." It was obvious that they were sleeping together in my house, and Carrie seemed okay with that. "I'm not going to move out of my house," Jenna said. "No, this is my house," I corrected her. "I owned it before we got married, and my name is the only one on the contract." "Well, you left, so now it's mine," she argued. "That's not how the law works," I explained. "Since I pay the utilities and taxes, I'm still the legal owner. Even though I've been gone for a short while, I still own it. Don't worry, I'll give you lovebirds until the end of next month to find a place to live. Just make sure you take your daughter with you." "What do you mean, your daughter?" "She's our daughter," Jenna protested. "You couldn't have spoken truer words," I replied. I chuckled. Jenna looked puzzled. Then I said to Carrie, "I know you hate being called Polish, so I have good news for you. Your real father is not me but George." The silence in the room was deafening. After a minute, Jenna meekly asked, "What?" "Yes, Jenna, it seems that your little carelessness on your wedding day led to the appearance of a child, but not mine. But good news for you, Carrie. You can now take your real dad's last name and become Carrie. I wonder if maybe Mom didn't insist on the name Carrie as a sign of respect for her lover." I looked at Jenna, and she looked at George. He looked terrified. "What? George?" I asked. "Don't you want to be a dad?" I continued. "Well, that's too bad. Take responsibility." I tried to console them. "But think about it this way. It's just 4 more years until college." Jenna and George almost said together, "I don't believe that." I handed them the DNA report. "See for yourself." They grabbed it, looked at it, and then both fainted. "Carrie, tell the lovebirds that your mom will be served with divorce papers sometime next week, along with an eviction notice." I turned and walked away. The whole time I was gone, I wondered if this affair had been going on throughout the marriage. In fact, I wondered if she was even faithful to me. We met when she came to buy a car. George was working on a car, and we both thought it would be a great date. Did she choose me or not? I truly was helpless, ignorant, vulnerable all this time. George laughed at me behind my back and also made polished jokes in front of my face. I returned to the apartment and drank beer. In the morning, I went to the lawyer and asked him to start processing the documents. Of course, I knew that I would have to sell the house and split the proceeds. But being a barely working person, I did not have to pay alimony or child support, especially since there was already another man in my place. At least that's what I hoped. I loved Jenna and George. The betrayal was incredible. It will take me a long time to trust anyone, be it a man or a woman. Maybe I should see a psychologist. As the divorce process continued, I went back to work at the car dealership, but this time as a salesman. I made it clear to everyone that I wasn't the boss anymore, and I only needed to make one sale a week to cover my rent and groceries. Actually, I insisted on just one. When it came to court-ordered child support, I wanted to make sure that by the end of the month, I only had enough money left for my basic needs. Jenna got a lawyer. I don't know how she could afford one. Maybe he worked for free. He'll be surprised. They checked my bank accounts and saw that I had used up the money from the sale. They even checked the sale itself, but found nothing wrong with it. They didn't search thoroughly enough. I heard from my colleagues at work that while I was away, George came by almost every day for the first 2 weeks and asked Anna for a job. She kept turning him down. Eventually, he gave up. Now he regretted not getting his ASS certification, as the only job he could find was at I Hope Jenna went full-time, or else they would struggle financially. I contacted the realtor and told Jenna that I was putting the house up for sale, expecting to split our assets equally. She had already received an eviction notice, so she had to move out before the house was sold. One evening, there was a knock on my door. It was Jenna. When I opened the door, I looked at her. "What do you need?" "Kurt, can we talk? I don't think this is a good idea. We're in a lawsuit against each other." "Come on, Kurt, it's just me here. No lawyers. Can we sit down and have a civil conversation?" "Yeah, I guess. But let's go to Denny's," I said. "There will be witnesses." I thought to myself, I didn't trust her enough to be alone with her. We sat down in a booth at Denny's, and after a couple of minutes of pleasantries, I asked, "Why Jenna?" She looked at me, hesitated, and answered, "I think the simple answer is that I liked both of you, and I couldn't decide." "So you were dating both of us at the same time?" She looked down at the table. "Yes," she admitted. "But George told me not to tell you anything because he knew it would ruin your personal and work relationship with him. So when I asked you to marry me, why did you say yes?" I asked. "Because I loved you." "What about George?" I asked. "I loved him too, but I realized he wouldn't be a good husband. When you asked me to marry you, he and I talked about it and decided to end our relationship. I wanted to focus on us and getting ready for our wedding. So, on our wedding day, while spending time with him, you said, 'I'm marrying him, but you're still my man.'" She started crying. Everything felt wrong then. "What was it, Jenna?" She hesitated and then said, "I didn't want to lose him, and he didn't want to lose me." "Well, now you both have each other and your child." By the way, she chose a great name for her. I didn't even notice until I had time to think during the 3 months on the road. "I didn't know Carrie wasn't yours," I said. "I really didn't." Then she looked at me and said, "Kurt, I wanted to talk to you today to tell you that I still love you. It's nice to hear from you, Jenna, but I don't think you know what love is. I loved you more than anything in the world, and obviously you can't say the same. I loved you, but I can honestly say that I don't love you anymore. I loved you with all my heart, but now I feel only contempt for you," I said. When I said this, she looked up at me and realized that our relationship was over. There will never be us again. I had to ask her one more question. "Have you ever stopped?" She hesitated and then apparently decided that it didn't matter and told the truth. We never stopped. We had our lulls, but we got together usually twice a month. I was hoping for a different answer, but I was still glad she told me the truth. One more question. "What happened about a year ago that made you treat me so badly? Your attitude towards me began to change." "The outward contempt was obvious," I asked. Her face turned red. Then she got a little angry. "George started trying to talk me into having a threesome and not with you. I probably could have done it if you had participated, but we couldn't figure out how to do it. He kept insisting on it, and it made me resent you for something I know you would never do. I know it sounds strange, but I thought I could have my 2 men loving me together, and I resented you for not being the person to allow it." "So, did you do it?" I asked. No, I thought about it. But then you left and my whole world fell apart, she replied. Well, now you can do it, knowing that I don't care what you do. It doesn't bother me anymore, I said. Months later, we stood before a judge and he declared us divorced. George was there too. As we were leaving the courthouse, Jenna suggested, maybe we can grab a drink the old-fashioned way. Of course, I said. By this time, the anger I felt towards them had disappeared. Then I thought, this will be the last time I have to be with them. Now they can be alone. Let them live in their own mess. They deserve each other. Ha! Jenna will have to get used to a lower standard of living. Okay, maybe I still feel upset. I may be Polish, but I am still a respected person. Second story. Old story, but been on mine just one event, I guess. In 2017, I found out that my wife of 6 years had been cheating on me for about a year. It all started in late 2015 when I suddenly developed extreme anxiety, which completely changed my life overnight. During this difficult time, my wife began talking to her ex via Snapchat behind my back. On the day I discovered her infidelity, I was lying in bed unable to sleep. My wife asked me to charge her phone on my side of the bed because the plug was closer to me. She fell asleep, and as I was scrolling on my phone, I noticed her phone lighting up with messages from her cousin. At first, I didn't think much of it, but something inside me kept urging me to look through her phone, even though I had never done so before. So I did, and well, it devastated me. In the text with her cousin, who I have never liked because she has cheated on her husband multiple times and at one point did not know if her child was his, my wife and her were talking about her ex, and when I started to scroll deeper, I see where my wife admits to sleeping with him twice. Well, I did not sleep the rest of the night. I just walked around the house lost. We have 2 kids, and now I find out my wife of 6 years has been sleeping and texting her ex for almost a year. I went through our phone records and bam, I see where they have talked and texted. She took my trust and threw it out the window, knowing that I never went through her phone or asked any questions of who she is texting. So I wait till she is awake and all hell breaks loose on my part. I demand she not lie to me and tell me the truth. She admits to the affair, and then I lose it, said things I should not have, and just go off. I have to calm down because my kid's awake and we have to get them to school. Before she takes the kids to school, she is still in shock that I found out, and before I close her door, I throw my ring at her and tell her she is a no-good cheater. The story has much more to it after this, but it's been heavy on my mind, like I said lately. Thanks for joining us on this chapter of Relation Tales. If you were moved by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss out on the upcoming emotional roller coaster of relationships. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember, every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon. Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales. Do you know that feeling when you've done something successfully and think that luck will always be on your side? Many people are familiar with this feeling, but it can be misleading. When someone starts feeling superior, they might stop paying attention to important things and make mistakes with serious consequences. My neighbor, who seemed ordinary, was one of those people. They made a mistake that led me to discover my wife's infidelity. My name is Ned, and I've been married to Robin for 6 years. We have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Robin takes care of the kids at home, and they have me completely wrapped around their little fingers. Just hearing them say, "Daddy," melts my heart. I'm usually the assertive type, but with Robin, I tend to defer to her equally strong personality. However, around her friends and family, I come off as meek and easygoing, not one to cause trouble. It's unfortunate how people like to stereotype others. This dynamic extends to the bedroom, where Robin typically sets the agenda for our nights. Don't get me wrong, we both enjoy intimacy and I have no complaints. But recently everything has changed. Just 6 weeks ago, I felt like a normal, sane guy. Now, when I look in the mirror, I feel like a different person. Maybe I'll end up in jail, or maybe I won't even be charged. All I'm doing is putting a couple of scammers in a difficult position. It's strange, but I feel like I'm fulfilling my wife's wishes, just not in the usual way. However, I don't care about her opinion at all. I'm a strong guy who works out regularly. I can easily lift 200 pounds, maybe even more if I really tried, but I don't want to hurt my back. When I was carrying Spencer over my shoulder, I was grateful for my good fitness level. He was wriggling and fighting until I pinched his nose closed and taped his mouth shut, which stopped his oxygen. "I can keep holding your nose if you keep misbehaving," I told him calmly. After that, Spencer became very obedient. I used a miner's light on my head to see in the dark. The temperature change was significant. Outside it was a warm summer night, but now it was cold and damp. The water drops helped to cool my overheated body. This was more intense than a morning workout. I had to stop several times as this journey took 30 minutes to complete. At each pause, I recorded the path I had taken. Once at my intended destination, I roughly dropped Spencer to the ground. This is what I think of men who interfere with other men's wives. Spencer tried to cover his vulnerabilities, but it was useless. Pent-up anger spilled out. I couldn't stand it and swung my leg a couple of times. I felt like a Hulk. Poor Spencer was in tears. After finishing my water bottle, I retraced my steps to find Robin. I carefully counted each stride, mindful of needing to navigate both out and back. My shirt clung to me, drenched with a mix of water and sweat. Spencer, who used to live a few doors down from me, is Robin's partner. I hope that will turn into was soon. At least I will make every effort to do so. I stumbled upon this knowledge by accident because it seems that I have been cuckolded for a long time, and they laughed at me behind my back. This is an insult to any man. When Spencer and his family moved in, a middle-aged man bought their house. Paul is a friendly guy, and I sometimes have a couple of beers with him at his house where Spencer used to live. So far, there has been no reason to introduce him to Robin or my children. He's a big fan of baseball, a sport that I've never been particularly interested in. But because Paul was an interesting conversationalist, I didn't mind watching baseball with him. However, about a month after moving in, Paul played a role in turning my life around. Ned, you won't believe what I've stumbled upon. There is a stash of DVDs in the laundry room behind the false wall. You should watch them, he said. I'm curious. Is it adult content? I asked. Yes, it seems to be a hidden camera recording. There are probably around 60 DVDs from 3 years. This one looks like the most recent, taken just a week before I bought the house, Paul replied. Paul inserted the disc, and the screen lit up. I took a sip of beer and sat on a bar stool. The camera angle was small, but it was clear that the man was Spencer and the woman was someone I knew from the neighborhood gatherings. I think her name is Sandra, and she is probably married. This recording surprised me because I saw my neighbor cheating on her husband with another neighbor. Do you know them? Paul asked when he saw my expression. Yes, the man is the previous landlord. He is married, and the woman is not his wife. She's married to someone else in the neighborhood. I think her name is Sandra. I replied, let's see what else is on these DVDs, Paul said, switching to another one. Paul's phone rang, and he excused himself to take the call. 10 seconds after the release of the new DVD, I wanted to scream, what the hell? Robin, my wife, climbed onto the bed in her bathrobe. I watched in horror as my marriage was falling apart in front of my eyes. Suddenly, Spencer appeared in the frame, who, before climbing onto the bed, cast a fleeting glance at the camera and grinned, apparently that only he was recording the haul. What happened next was a real horror for me. My good mood quickly disappeared. Instead, I felt a deep emptiness overshadowed by the pain in my chest. My desire to harm both of them has increased. After Spencer finished, they lay side by side, laughing and chatting. What's new with the cuckold? He asked my wife. This pathetic guy. I made him completely eat your cream pea that you made. She said mockingly, really? How did you do it? He asked. When I got home on Tuesday, Ned was in a good mood and clearly wanted something more. And you know I'm a smart woman, a couple of my light manipulations, and he's already eaten a pie. She said, I tried my best to contain my disgust. I thought Robin had destroyed my love that day. What a liar. He and Spencer would pay for their pride, and then another bad thing happened. Do you know what I've been dreaming about, Spencer? That we would leave our partners and be together for the rest of our lives. Closing my eyes, I felt myself drifting into my own world. Paul's voice brought me back to reality. Are you okay, man? He asked. Yes, just a little headache, I replied. I saw that Robin and Spencer had already rested enough to start the second race. I couldn't stand it and turned it off. I was fed up, so I told Paul I was leaving. Hey, Ned, before you go, do you recognize her? Asked Paul. Not really, just another woman next door. When was this movie made? I asked, trying to look as calm as possible. 2 days before the first one I showed you, he replied coldly. Trying to hide my anger, I said, well, at least it'll save you some money for adult movies. What a stupid girl. He cheated on his soulmate with everyone in the neighborhood, and she thinks he's interested in her. I left Paul's house as gracefully and quickly as I could and walked. Returning home now would probably lead to actions or words that I might regret. On the other hand, maybe this is exactly what I needed. By the time I got to my front door, darkness had enveloped not only the sky, but also my spirit. Robin was visibly upset, demanding, avoiding direct eye contact. I replied, I'm not feeling well, I'm going to bed. As I closed and locked the bedroom door, Robin's voice followed, persisting. That doesn't answer my question. Where were you? I fell onto the bed and heard the door handle rattling. Open this door. Unable to hold back my frustration any longer, I quickly opened the door and snapped at her. Listen, find somewhere else to sleep tonight. Robin's eyes widened, not so much in fear as in disbelief. Slamming the door shut, I went back to lying on the bed, regretting that my outburst had woken the kids. The quality of my sleep is up for debate. Even when sunlight came through the blinds, I still felt tired. The hot shower helped a bit, but my legs stayed weak. Since the children were still asleep, I moved quietly. Robin was waiting for me in the kitchen, where I poured myself a cup of coffee before addressing her. I'm not sure what you think you know, but it was a shame to call me a derogatory term. It's extremely unlike you. She declared, oh, forget about it. You are a worthless, unfaithful person. I've seen the footage. I answered calmly, I have no idea what video you're talking about. There must be someone else involved. She immediately began to justify herself. You are an ignorant, despicable person. Spencer recorded all your meetings on camera. I know what I'm talking about and what I saw. I'm filing for divorce. I replied coldly. Robin's behavior quickly changed from outright denial to aggressive hostility, spoken with malicious intent. Spencer claims that you can't afford to divorce me. His brother is a lawyer, so he should be aware. I would have received custody of the children, child support, and substantial maintenance. In addition, you would be responsible for providing housing for me and the children. I haven't denied you anything, so it's only your fragile ego that's hurt. So what if I had a relationship with Spencer, who suffered from this? Only your worthless ego. It doesn't really matter to me. Move on. I flipped my coffee cup over Robin's head, watching it smash against the far wall. Fortunately, there was no window nearby. Otherwise, my outburst would have cost me dearly. Robin stormed out of the kitchen, slamming her bedroom door. I grabbed both her and my car keys and left the house feeling frustrated and lost. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I didn't want to stay where I was. Ignoring Robin's calls, I was bombarded with text messages instead. Why did you take my car keys? She said. Because I could, I replied. Stop acting like a child. It doesn't mean anything. You are the one I love, she said. I can do without your fake love. What I saw on the recordings will never leave my memory, I said. You'll forget about it. Please come home, she begged. Damn hero. I refused to just walk past it. I understood that I wouldn't be able to keep it, but I withdrew all the money from both our checking and savings accounts. It wasn't a substantial amount, but I figured it was better for me to have it than her. Researching divorce laws in my state online only confirmed how flawed the system was. Living in a state with equal distribution laws meant that her cheating didn't matter much in divorce. So I decided to delay starting the divorce process. Moving out was too expensive for me, so I came back home to find it empty. Robin's clothes were still there. I think she must have found the spare car keys and gone to see her mother, who lived about 30 miles away. Even though I hadn't started the divorce process, I didn't plan on spending another day acting like a loving couple with Robin. Our rented 3-bedroom ranch house was already full, so one of us would have to sleep on the couch. Since Robin wasn't there, she didn't get to choose. When she came back, she would find all her clothes neatly placed in the living room. That night, I was alone under the moonlight, with no sign of Robin or my children. It was just as well as thoughts of retribution against Robin still lingered. Instead of wallowing, I took it upon myself to destroy Robin's wedding dress, using box cutters with surprising efficacy. Our trusty paper shredder took care of any remaining images of Robin. Perhaps years down the line, my children may question the absence of cherished photos with their mother, but I can always attribute it to Robin's aversion to being photographed. Robin returned, but she didn't stay long. She doesn't seem to like the idea of sleeping on the couch because I didn't see any other option for her. The time spent with the children really lifted my spirits. How much longer are you going to play the martyr? She asked ironically. How much longer will you keep cheating? I asked. Once we've crossed that line, he's better than you, and I'm not going to leave him. Help me move my things back to the bedroom, and maybe you'll be lucky and I'll stay with you. But it's not likely, she said, making a condition. I'd rather live alone than with a hypocritical and pathetic person like you. You're a terrible person, Robin, I said, my nerves on edge. How about I just divorce you, since you keep complaining? Is that what you want? I can easily find someone else. Your kids can call Daddy. Think about it. You're going to give away your entire salary while some other guy enjoys my company and your kids. So stop it, or that's exactly what I'm going to do. She started blackmailing me. When I blocked her way to our bedroom, she made an offended and angry face, took the children, and left. A few days later, Robin and the children returned home. Robin looked confused. I was sleeping in my bed, and Robin would lie down next to me. I push her to the floor whenever she tries to snuggle up to me. Listen, Ned, if you don't start fulfilling your duties as a husband, including intimacy in bed with me, I'll start bringing men home. Maybe that's what you want, isn't it? You want to sit there and just watch while a real man satisfies my feminine needs. Do you need that? Believe me, I can easily arrange this, she said, and I could not believe that this was being said by a man with whom I had lived under the same roof for many years. I clenched Robin's tightly curled hair in my fist, pulling her closer until her face was just inches from mine. If you dare to do this with another man in front of my children, both you and he will suffer the consequences. Do you understand, scoundrel? For the first time, fear flashed in Robin's eyes amid the chaos. But she couldn't resist provoking me as she rushed down the hallway, slamming the bedroom door. You will pay me every month for the next 16 years, she said, clearly resentful. We didn't sleep in the same bed that night, and the door remained firmly locked. Time was running out. It seemed likely that she would soon file for divorce, and the nightmares of how to support her and her lovers would become a harsh reality. Leaving a defeated man alone in his house every night for several hours is a recipe for disaster. Eventually, I found a solution that suited me well, though its success remained uncertain. I knew I had to take the chance. Waiting for the right moment, luck favored me. Just as Robin finished putting the kids to bed, she dropped the bombshell. I'm heading out for the night. Don't wait up for me. That was the trigger. As she exited the kitchen towards the garage, I sprang into action. Straddling her, I swiftly secured duct tape around her mouth, muffling any protest. Binding her hands behind her back, despite her struggles, I managed to stuff her into the trunk of her car. Checking her phone, I discovered she'd been in contact with Spencer. I needed him to take the bait, so I composed a message from Robin's phone. I can't get you out of my mind. Do you want to go skinny dipping under the moonlight? I asked. In less than a minute, the reply came. Sure, where at? Lake Moore, off Highway 68. Park away from the lights at the north end, I texted back. Got it. Be there in about half an hour, came the response. I grabbed the bag I had prepared from my own car and tossed it into Robin's front seat. Brief concern about leaving the kids crossed my mind, but not enough to stop me. I arrived at Lake Moore in just 20 minutes. Dressed in a light aqua wig to match Robin's usual style, I sat in the driver's seat holding a handful of cinnamon powder. When Spencer pulled into the parking lot, he parked on the passenger side. After getting out of his car, he opened my front passenger door. Leaning towards the car, he exclaimed, "Hey, little lady, great idea." When he turned to me, he realized that it was actually me. Grabbing his hair with my right hand, I raised my left hand and blew cinnamon powder into his face. While he was coughing and choking, I pushed his head into the dashboard with my right hand. I quickly pulled Spencer out of the car. The powder turned out to be more effective than expected because of his disorientation. In just 15 seconds, I taped his mouth shut and tied his hands behind his back. I made sure to wear latex gloves all the time so as not to leave DNA traces. I didn't hurt him and hit him a few times to make him stop resisting. Understand who is in charge here. Although I may have shown gentleness towards Robin, I am ready to go further if necessary. I said it. With an expression of obvious horror on her face, Spencer nodded in agreement. I suppose that updates you. Spencer patiently awaits my return. I could have left him alone, but I'm not that kind of guy. Instead, I opened the trunk and saw Robin's terrified face. She looked like she belonged in a horror movie, wide-eyed and tearful. Come on, Robin, it's not so bad, let me guess. We can figure this out. You'll give up Spencer. It was just a fling. You really love me. You never meant to hurt me. Robin nodded repeatedly, but I couldn't believe a word she said. Sorry, babe. Too little, too late. But don't worry, I'm not going to kill you. You'll meet your end naturally. Just so you know, remember the day you told Spencer you wanted to leave your spouses and be together forever? That's when you sealed your fate as a foolish cheater, I said. Robin nodded slowly in agreement. 2 days later, he recorded a video of Sandra cheating on her husband in bed. You were just a passing infatuation for him and nothing more. It's almost funny how you believed that he was genuinely interested in you. Anyway, let's reunite the two of you, I said. Robin made grunting and moaning noises, floundering in the trunk like a fish out of water. I pinched her nose and gave her the same warning as Spencer. I put Robin down and closed the trunk of her sedan. Like I was lifting weights, I hoisted Robin onto my shoulder and embarked on my 30-minute journey. Pausing only once, I followed my map back to where I had left Spencer. 80 steps, then a right turn, followed by 164 steps, a left turn, and so on. 14 turns with no margin for error. Robin shielded me from the sporadic rainfall. Just as doubt began to creep in, there he was. Spencer made faint sounds as my light approached. With care, I seated Robin. There you go, kids. You can spend your lives together now. Wasn't that your wish, Robin? To be with Spencer forever. Dreams do come true, you see. Though I doubt you'll last more than a few days, but at least you'll be together. No need for thanks. You're welcome. And now, no more sneaking around. Remember what you called me, Robin? A hopeless wimp? Well, it's hard to believe that hopeless wimp achieved this, isn't it? Their pleading looks filled me with warmth. I was sure that I could manipulate them to fulfill my every wish. There is no unfulfilled wish left in my head. Now I'm done with them. They destroyed me emotionally and turned me into a monster who doesn't understand what he's doing. They can only blame themselves. You were both very smug when Robin tricked me into eating your so-called pie. It was the last straw for me when I discovered it. The way you both laughed heartily while discussing it. Thank you, Spencer, for recording this moment. You saved me the expense of hiring a private investigator. To the outside world, I still seem like a tolerant, cool-headed husband. Their tears couldn't shake me. I dealt with them one by one. I needed to change their current image a little, so I had to untie them. Robin didn't resist much, but Spencer, feeling that he had loosened his grip, tried to fall on me. After I disoriented him for a short time, he succumbed to my manipulations, and I finished the case. Robin, who was watching this, offered no resistance. It wasn't easy to understand Robin's words, but they seemed to express something like, "I'm sorry, Ned, please change your mind. My children depend on me. I promise to be a better spouse and never betray you and blah blah again. Let me outline the scenario for you, Robin. You and Spencer are currently deep in Eldon's cave about 1,000 feet below the surface. Bears live in the cave, but rats pose an immediate threat. As soon as you relieve yourself, the smell will attract them, and they will start chasing. At first, only a few rats will detect you, signaling the rest of their relatives. Your fate is sealed when a whole crowd of them comes. Then you will have a hard time. Try your best to ignore them. It will be easier to get over it. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. It was as if I electrocuted them because they started trying their best to get out of my trap. It's quite appropriate, isn't it? You both behaved like despicable rats towards your spouses. You kept us in the dark, and now you're going to spend your lives in the dark. I took another bottle of water out of the pocket of my cargo shorts and wasted no time emptying it. Carrying these two cheaters made me sweet. You will need water to survive, so just dip your head into any of the reservoirs that you come across. But be careful, as some of them are deep enough to trap you. There are no sharp edges to hold on to, and they are so slippery that if you slip, you will never get out. Be careful when moving in the dark, as the cliff can be hundreds of feet deep. Make one wrong turn, and you may end up 2,000 feet below the surface. Unlike you, I have humanity, and I'm just warning you so that it's easier for you to get out. But I don't think this information will help you in any way. But still, I had to warn you. Both were crying and breathing hard. I had to fix their legs with duct tape so that if anything happened, they wouldn't try to run after me. Everything was done for safety reasons. Now, I admit that I have some inclinations that I didn't even know about. I find pleasure in this situation, but I'll give you a chance to fight back. Usually these jokes don't have padlocks, but yours does. I don't want you to scream and attract attention, although predators may come before people find you. I'm not that cruel, so I'll free your hands before I leave. You will need to cooperate to remove the remnants of the adhesive tape holding you down. It will be completely dark. Spencer knows this well, having been here for over an hour. Robin, let me demonstrate. I turned off my miner's lantern. If you've never encountered total darkness in a cave, you can't understand how disorienting it is. Turning on the light again, I felt relieved. Although I knew the way out, it would be almost impossible to navigate without the light. Do you still think that I'm going to support your messy lifestyle for the next 16 years? Now someone else will be a mother to your children. I'd like to know your last wishes, but honestly, I don't care. I hope that you and your creator will be able to coordinate your life choices. Just to make sure Spencer wasn't acting impulsively with Robin, I decided to postpone their communication. That's what I think about men who betray other men, who sleep with other people's wives. Any actions have consequences, man. If the other 10 guys didn't do anything, then the 11th will do everything possible to take revenge. Spencer tried to move away from my leg, but it didn't help, and I disoriented him again. After removing their hands from the duct tape, and while Spencer couldn't hear anything, I went to Robin and said, "Then I left the car at the exit. It will have everything you need to start your life from scratch. I'm giving you a chance to make things right, but trust me, if you escape and go to the police, the consequences will be even worse. I hope you'll make a sensible choice, I said, and she waved her hand. I left without feeling any guilt. I could hear Robin's muffled screams in the darkness. The next day, a concerned citizen reported the presence of the two vehicles, triggering a thorough investigation. Despite being the seemingly unconcerned spouse, I was summoned for interrogation. My attorney steadfastly fended off the relentless questioning. I remained silent in the face of the detective's inquiries. Lacking an alibi for the night, the unfaithful disappeared. If the authorities believed they could incriminate me, they were welcome to try, but they never succeeded. The case remains as cold as Robin's heart was in her final months. No bodies were ever discovered. The sheriff obtained a search warrant for my residence, yet they found nothing incriminating. I don't claim to outsmart the system, but they couldn't tie me to the case. Perhaps if they had unearthed the skeletons, the outcome might have been different. I couldn't find peace of mind until I ensured the truth, so I arranged for DNA tests on both children. They were indeed mine. Shortly after Spencer vanished, a few DVDs found their way to his spouse. She needed information, so I persuaded Paul to duplicate some of them. We were unable to proceed with divorces until a year had elapsed, at which point we could file for abandonment. We stayed in contact, and our divorces were both finalized on the same day. Although she couldn't access the life insurance payout until Spencer was officially declared dead, she wasted no time in finding a financial supporter for herself and her children. I was genuinely happy for her. Trusting women is a challenge I struggle with. Year after year passes without any meaningful relationships. Several women tried to get me into bed, but the bravest succeeded. However, none managed to turn our physical encounters into lasting connections. I think I'm afraid of getting emotionally close to someone because I fear revealing the terrible thing I did, and I don't see any positive outcome from telling them. So, like the lyrics of that song, I find myself living alone. My first choice for a nanny only stayed for 2 weeks. The second attempt led me to find the perfect nanny who would stay with us indefinitely. Danny, who is older than me by a day, quickly bonded with the kids. Despite what my friends might think, our relationship is purely platonic. While she loves my children, she's wary of men, just as I am of women. We complement each other well. Eventually, when I could afford it, I bought a house. Danny moved in and has her own bedroom, where she's been living ever since. I see her as a sister, and she treats me like a brother. In an ideal system, situations like this wouldn't happen because of fair rules. But since the system is flawed, things like this are bound to happen. I've regained my composure once again. Oh, and one more thing. I have no idea if there's actually a single rat in Eldon's cave. I was just messing with their heads. I'll apologize the next time I see them. I also want to mention that there were no bears in the cave. It was just an ordinary cave where the only danger stemmed from the frightened person's own mind. There were no cliffs or deep waters. All they needed to do was simply walk along the walls, and eventually they would find a way out. I am not a real monster. I just wanted to teach those two deceivers a lesson. I had no idea whether they managed to get out of there or not. But do I have any remorse? Absolutely not. I feel not an ounce of guilt. If anything, I feel like I did less than I could have. Spencer was a true monster, forcing other men's wives to cheat on their husbands. I shudder at the thought of how many married women he had on his list, and it could have been. It's truly terrible. But what's even more frightening is that these women continue to live with their husbands as if nothing happened. They don't even suspect that their wives could be cheating on them. And the children. What if they're not even theirs and they're living in complete ignorance? To me, that's the most horrifying and contemptible thing imaginable. And do I have the right to tell all those men whose wives I saw on the recordings? Would that be the right thing to do? On one hand, yes, I would help open the eyes of naive men, but on the other hand, I could destroy dozens of families, and who ultimately benefits from that? That's why I believe it's better not to meddle in other people's lives. But if anyone dares to interfere with mine, I will fight and go to the end. I won't tolerate humiliation. I could have come to terms with it if my wife had approached me and said she wanted a divorce, but under one condition, if she hadn't cheated on me behind my back. Of course, I would have been shocked. I would have tried to work things out to win her back. I would have gone to counseling sessions and everything else. But if nothing worked, then I would have let her go. That's the best scenario when a person doesn't break their marriage vows and only seeks comfort with someone else after the divorce is officially finalized. But how many cases like this do you know? Hundreds? Tens? They are few, and as sad as it may sound, most spouses don't want to ruin their marriage, but still prefer to cheat on the side, and that's extremely unfortunate. Nevertheless, I believe that my ex-wife managed to escape, as I told her, And in that case, she either started a new life from scratch or is planning revenge against me along with her lover. But that's unlikely. Judging by her scared and confused face, she learned a valuable lesson. At least I hope so. Second story. I 26 found out my girlfriend 32F of 3 years has been sleeping with people while we were seeing each other. So recently my girlfriend and my relationship hasn't exactly been smooth sailing as of late. In the first 2 years it was seemingly perfect. Recently the trust has gone a little. She went through my phone while I was out the other day and obviously found nothing except a couple messages to my friend whom I confided in talking about a few negatives of our relationship seeking advice. I thought back on our relationship since it's been rocky and noticed a few inconsistencies. So I decided to go through her phone while she was asleep, and what I found was horrifying to me, to say the least. My girlfriend and I had started talking seriously, seeing each other in the new year of 2021. We chatted a lot through text and FaceTime until we met in April 2021. By the end of April, we were officially in a relationship. Later, I discovered messages on her phone from her friends revealing that she had been meeting and having sex with 3 men that I know of during this time. These messages also indicated that she knew it was wrong and needed to stop. She had told me that the last time she was with someone was in mid-2020 before we were serious. But that turned out to be a lie. Now we have a child, a house, and a family together, but I realized she had been involved with many others from our hometown. When we first got together, she claimed to have only slept with 9 men. But based on old texts arranging meetups, it seems closer to 30-40 men. Her friends seem to glorify this behavior, but looking back, I wonder if I was naive to think she'd be different, especially considering her best friend's history. She assured me she was different, but now I see it was a red flag I overlooked. She doesn't know that I know all of this information, but I really don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do for the best. I feel like she will try and make out it was okay because we weren't officially together, but I want to make sure I'm not going insane before I fight against that claim. Any advice on what to do from here, because I am struggling? Thanks for joining us on this chapter of Relation Tales. If you are moved by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss out on the upcoming emotional roller coaster of relationships. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember, every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon.